Hello and welcome to this session, Gender Entrepreneurships, Reflections from Mentorship Experiences. I'm Tanya Joseph and I'll be chairing today's session. I'm a trustee of the Cherie Bear Foundation for Women and have over 15 years experience in campaigning and promoting women's rights in public, private and NGO sectors. We're really thrilled to be taking part in this conference and to be able to share some of the insights and learnings from our work supporting APEC-Canada Growing Business Partnership via our Mentoring Women in Business program, implemented by the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada and funded by the Government of Canada. It's so important, particularly in this really difficult climate, as we think about how we can build back better, to take time to listen to the lived experiences of women entrepreneurs and the challenges they're facing in starting, growing and sustaining their businesses. We cannot underestimate the stark impact of COVID-19 on women entrepreneurs across the world. Even before the pandemic, women entrepreneurs were not operating on a level playing field, and the pandemic has only exacerbated existing inequalities. Not only is reducing the gender entrepreneurship gap an issue of justice, it also makes economic sense. Women entrepreneurs have the potential to be the engines of growth of economies around the world. And there's never been a more important time for partnerships such as this APEC-Canada Growing Business Partnership to help unlock the potential of these women. This session particularly focuses on the role of gender in determining entrepreneurship experiences and the important role of mentorship in addressing these challenges. You'll hear directly from mentees that we've been working with and also the Cherie Blair Foundation team about how we've been using the insights from the women we work with to inform our policy and advocacy work and future programme developments. We're also delighted to be joined by Amir Naihawan, who worked in the Growing Business Partnership from its earliest days and is an expert in gender policy in the Asia Pacific region. But first, I'd like to introduce you to a fantastic Cherie Bear Foundation member, Efe Alopak, Programme Manager, and two of our truly inspirational mentees, Julie and Andy, who have been supported by the CBFW as part of the APEC-Canada Growing Business Partnership. I'd like you each to introduce yourself, but first, perhaps Efe, you could talk to us a little bit about the mentoring programme and how it works and our work in the region.
I'm very excited to share with you a little bit about our mentoring program and give a good intro to the mentees that we've worked with. So as Tanya just said, my name is Efe. I work on the Mentoring Women in Business program as a program manager. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of an intro to what we do here. So the Mentoring Women in Business program was born from the belief that the power of mentoring, a passion for technology, and a view that community is a powerful force for change. By forging these elements together, we found a really pioneering way to support women entrepreneurs around the world. So our program officially kicked off its pilot program in 2010, and then we officially kicked off our program in 2011. So how does our program work? So on our mentoring program, we match women from lower middle income economies with men and women mentors from around the world. And these mentors help these women who are their mentees build their businesses, confidence, and skills. Our program is conducted entirely online, and the online nature of our program provides really great flexibility for our busy mentors and our busy mentees to kind of work together. And this is because they can schedule their meetings and their calls around their work and family commitments, whilst also being able to kind of meet at their desks or on the go. Our mentors and mentees use what we call as our mentoring platform, where they can share messages, set up video calls, as well as work on objectives that revolve around the mentee's business and professional development, as well as the mentor's own learning objectives. Researchers found that online mentoring makes it possible for those who might otherwise be excluded due to their gender or geographical location to participate in mentoring. This was key over the past year, particularly due to obviously the pandemic. By running our program online, it made it possible for us to continue to deliver the program and to impact businesses around the world during quite a challenging time. So the women that we work with who are nominated to our program are all pioneering driven change makers. they've created businesses in all types of the sectors imaginable, from hospitality, electronics, retail, textiles, agriculture, you name it. There is a woman on our program who's either doing it or about to launch a business in that particular sector. When it comes to the stages of business, we have a diverse range of women who are either at the very beginning of their entrepreneurial journeys, either about to launch their business or have been running the business for maybe a year or two, to women who've been running the business for a number of years. When it comes to the mentors who work on our program, they are experienced business professionals who have a range of experience and expertise that they share with our mentees. And they come from over 80 countries from around the world. So our partnership with APEC-Canada Growing Business all kind of kicked off in 2010 when APF Canada sponsored 60 women entrepreneurs from the Philippines, Viet Nam, Indonesia, and Peru to be our mentees on our program. These women entrepreneurs were matched with Canadian mentors, and together they worked together for a year on the business needs and the personal or professional development of their mentees. And the mentors that we recruited were Canadian based, and they brought a range of experience from business planning, marketing, finance, to support these entrepreneurs as they kind of set out objectives to uplift and empower, as well as develop their business skills. When it comes to the impact of our business, the impact of the program and the impact on the women entrepreneurs particularly, when we asked the women to feedback on their experience in the past year, key themes came through. So they noticed, for example, an increase in their business skills and their business profits, as well as gaining kind of key skills in kind of the managerial skills, as well as being able to increase their confidence through the work with their mentors. But obviously, it's all great cheering for me. You talk about it. What's really great is having the opportunity to actually hear from the women entrepreneurs themselves who've been on the program. So I'm really excited to kind of pass the mic on to two mentees who have actually experienced the program and are able to obviously then share their own kind of personal experience and their personal learnings from their time on the program. So without further ado, I'll hand over.
So Andy, can I ask you to kick us off?
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm very honored to join this event. So I'm one of the mentee which worked with CBF mentor from Indonesia. Well, actually, I'm not alone from Indonesia. I had several friends who was from Kinsmans community. This community was one of the key how I got connected with the CBFW. So I would like to introduce myself. My name is Andi Mersida Amalia Tambas. I am an Indonesian, was born 48 years ago in an ancient city, campus city in Germany, in Tübingen. Moved back to Jakarta with my parents during my school years age. Live now in the rural part of Jakarta, which is known as South Tangerang City. So following this, you can expect that I had a quite diverse life experience that contribute a lot to my journey in pioneering ideas, in developing and sustaining my education or learning enterprise. So maybe you would like to know what I'm doing now. So my business has to do a lot with education, well-being, and human resources. So I give service directly to formal educations and informal. What I do for 11 years now is conducting mindfulness program, mindfulness yoga program for schools, students, teacher, parents, adaptive yoga, private lessons for special needs, mindfulness journaling for young future leader. This is a part of coaching program. writing for healing, coaching, mindfulness, writing private classes for adults, which includes the publication or book production. The business that I'm doing now seems very elaborate, but this is the part of the whole process. Um, at first, it was only me who were the part of this business. Then the urge to expand my ability, my service to society became bigger and bigger from time to time. Then in the last 5 years, I hired partners by project. I Mostly they were women, and I prioritize to collaborate, cooperate, and support talented women in creating events and programs to serve the society. So my partners in collaborating projects are, for example, graphic designer, scriptwriter, entrepreneurs, teachers, school founders, volunteers, etc. And how do I became an entrepreneur? This is a calling. Yeah. At first, when I got a yoga teacher for children certificate, I had no intention to become a yogapreneur because the reason I took the yoga teacher for children course between my deadlines as an online magazine for parents managing editor that time was to fulfill my daughter's request. In 2010, she was only 4.5 years old. She was crying when we revealed together that there was no yoga classes for her age around our area where we lived. Her aspiration to learn and dive into yoga started from me indeed. She witnesses how I took care of myself, keeping balance between my work and career. That time I was an editor, managing editor, and I keep on being a mother, raising my family, my children, my child, and then I continuously learn, growing inside, practicing meditation, yoga, and holistic approach and in parenting. So uh, this is all about my business. But then after I was selected as part of the mentoring program, uh, I got many experiences. Hopefully, this will show you how this mentoring supported me, even the pandemic and the impact was very big for everyone, not only for women entrepreneurs, even for men.
So lots of interesting stuff there. Thank you, Andy. Before we get into that Q&A, perhaps, Julie, I can ask you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your business.
Hi, I'm Julie Ortuose from the Philippines. I own a hair salon and an e-commerce site. I'm a wife and a mother to a 5-year-old. And prior to being an entrepreneur, I was actually in corporate. I decided to join the mentoring program because one of the women in business in the Philippines I look up to, she invited me to join the program. And back then, I really had no mentors when I started as an entrepreneur. Truthfully, my family was against me being an entrepreneur because of the risks involved. So I started the business without without that kind of support. So I decided it. I had nothing to lose. I had actually no expectations. It wasn't really very tangible or clear what the outcome would be if you joined a mentoring program like this. But I decided to try and apply, and it worked out really well for me.
Thanks very much, Julie. We'll come back to you shortly. I think, Andy, we're going to, let me ask you a couple of questions that came out of your introduction. It'd be really good to understand how your mentor's perspective gave you a new way of, if it gave you a new way of thinking about your business.
He always challenged me with questions, and this question um, somehow it makes me bring out the best from within. So maybe all of us women, we all have the solution inside, but sometimes we cannot pull them out because we need an echoing wall or someone who challenged us with questions. And I think my mentor is very, very helpful in this context. He asked me questions, and this question is actually something that I already know the answer, and it become the solution of anything that any problem that I face.
And Julie, it sounds like when you set up your business, you were doing it without support.
Yeah.
So how did you find your mentor helping you to make in your journey, in your the establishment of your business?
So I think it had a lot to do with the way we were matched by the foundation. I did specify that I had concerns with confidence and other such issues. And so I was matched with a mentor who happened to be a life coach and a psychologist. And that worked out well for me. I mean, I'm actually a business major, so it's not that the technical side of business I needed help with. It was really more on my self-confidence in running my own business. I mean, considering the fact that I didn't have that support system. So it was great that I was matched with her. It was also great that she is actually from a developing country as well. She is originally from Brazil and she migrated to Canada. So her background made her understand where I was coming from, and I felt it with our discussions. She understood how it is in a developing country, how the government is, and the kind of systems we work with. So, and the fact that she lived in Canada and knew about how systems were in Canada showed me a different perspective as well in terms of what we could aspire for. So at least for my business, we really wanted it to be something that's that supports family life and supports being a human. I mean, instead of being too absorbed in work, we want our work to support the lives of our employees and also ourselves as business owners. So we were able to see that side of the world, I guess. That's how it is in developed countries. But for us, it's really different, and that made me want to adopt that kind of way of working to our business as well.
So I think that's really interesting, having that perspective of someone who's from who came from a middle-income country, who's now in Canada, who's now able to bring perspectives which are really, really useful and insightful for you. And I understand that your business actually grew during COVID.
Yes.
So it would be really interested to understand more about how you manage that and how your business and your employees adapted during this period.
Okay. Truthfully, it was really luck in a sense, because I had a salon and we decided to go into e-commerce, but we didn't know COVID would happen, which would result in being supported, being in an industry that would grow along with COVID. So when I was in the mentorship program in 2018 to 2019, we were actually setting up the fundamentals for the e-commerce side of the business. And it happened such that by the time COVID happened and the salon had to shut down because of the risks there, it was the e-com side that supported our company. So our salon team, the nail technicians, the styling assistants, they had to shift to the e-com side. They started picking and packing, and that supported us throughout this pandemic. But it was really fortuitous. I couldn't have predicted, and it was great that I had my mentor to help me back in 2018 to 2019 to set up the fundamentals for that business. So by this time, we were well staffed enough, and we had the right systems and processes in place to accommodate this growth.
Andy, what happened to your business during COVID? How did you adapt it? Because you were doing yoga, having people in the studio. How did you manage to change your business over the pandemic?
Yes, I think fortunately, like Julie, I got a mentor who was working in an IT corporate for about 20 years or so. Mohan Bala, he was an Indian. He resigned from the corporate world and become a coach, agility coach. So I was fortunate to got such a mentor, and how he dig my potential by giving me challenge and uh, giving me tips in technology. This is really helpful. Although I'm very sure that people now suffered for their well-being, and yoga is very helpful. But how I deliver materials, learning materials, how I deliver classes, this is really out of my mind. But then I see one by one the solution come up. And now, maybe last week, if I just noticed that I was just finished with the pre-recording online class course with a partner from the team, for the core team, who joined the mentoring too. She lived outside Jakarta, and we just set up a pre-recording session. And hopefully in the next month, my module will be delivered online and will be easily be accessed by anyone. And I talk about mindful parenting, which I know parents are now very, very in need of help. This is what I can share.
Thank you. Efe, I think what's really interesting is that in some sense, the platform and the ability of mentors to talk to mentees across the world, that COVID hasn't in fact impacted on that, right? They've been able to do it, but some of the skills and support and the questions that the mentees have been asking their mentors must have really changed the way that the foundation has had to work, and the support it's been having to give to the mentors themselves.
Yes, that's a really good point, and definitely something that we saw a lot of, obviously, during the past year when the pandemic was actually quite at its peak. So obviously, we have our platform, which is something that we've actually improved over the last couple of months to further give mentors and mentees easy access to not only connect, to sharing messages, setting up video calls, as well as integrating some of our resources to make it more easily accessible to our mentors and mentees to kind of supplement the one-to-one mentoring training that they obviously conduct together. But obviously we also kind of work quite closely with our in-country partners. So one of the things that we tried to do, especially at the kind of peak of COVID, was to reach out to our in-country partners. So our in-country partners are the organizations that nominate women entrepreneurs to our program. So we reached out to them to offer our support and to obviously encourage them to also reach out to the women that they nominated, just so that, our mentees were also aware that there were obviously people around who could try and give them support when needed. Additionally, we also reached out to our mentors as we kind of realized that obviously it was quite a challenging time, not just for the women entrepreneurs, but also for the mentors and trying to figure out how best to support their women through such a kind of unique experience and obviously a challenging time. So again, just reaching out to our mentors was something that our team did just to kind of offer our support, to kind of make sure that they're aware that we were here to offer any support that they needed, or just kind of have an ear if they needed anything to kind of talk about.
And then just thinking about the program as a whole, how can we build on the gains and successes of that first cohort of mentors?
Definitely. So as kind of mentioned, one of the things that we've been looking to improve to ensure that we're obviously providing the best service to our mentors and mentees was to improve the kind of mentoring platform that we currently have. So like I said, mentors are now able to there is a central base where mentors and mentees are able to kind of connect with one another. Previously, there wasn't something like that before. And so now we have this space where they can actually connect online, so they can share direct messages, They can share files. They can obviously use the system to kind of manage the objectives that they set together, so they can kind of reference it throughout their time on the program. We're also looking at ways in which we can also incorporate mentoring into our other programs to reach even more women who potentially may not have considered mentoring as something that they may have wanted to do or would have found useful. And a kind of key example of this is the WE program that we're currently running in Indonesia and Vietnam. And this program basically provides a journey for women as they kind of go through each stage of different programs that we currently run. So, for example, they start with her venture, which is a mobile app, before they then move on to a intensive course called Road to Growth. And then finally, they will come on to the mentoring program, which will give them a chance to reflect on what they've learned, next steps for their business, and have the opportunity to kind of bounce those ideas off a mentor, which is one of the few things we're hopefully using to improve our services for women entrepreneurs around the world.
So it's a question I'm going to ask all of you actually, is what do you think makes a successful mentoring relationship? Effie, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, I was going to give the women the chance before I didn't want to like, you know, sully any
Give them a moment
ideas.
to think.
Geez, so what makes mentoring really helpful? I think for us, or from our perspective, it's the opportunity to offer a woman entrepreneur a chance to work with someone to not only upskill them, not just their business skills, but as kind of like Julie actually mentioned, there is that other avenue of, you know, professional and kind of personal development, which is something that we kind of incorporate within the mentoring as well. As we've kind of seen from the impact of the program, where mentoring is done well, and then women are able to feel fully supported and able to kind of move forward with the objectives and the goals that they have for their business. There is a kind of obvious key outcomes from that, from obviously an increase in revenue. They get a chance to not only expand their network, which I can see Andy did by obviously being able to connect with other women entrepreneurs on the program within their country, which is obviously something that we're really keen on and things that we obviously encourage throughout our network as well. And obviously the impact of that is that these women obviously kind of go back to their communities as change makers and pioneers and are able to kind of empower other women around them, which is obviously one of the kind of key outcomes that we hope from our mentoring program.
So Julie, what do you think makes a successful mentoring program?
So for me as a mentee, it was to understand my mentor, to know her strengths, and really bring out, well, I think it was because of the matching system. The objectives were clear, and that made me realize that, oh, she was matched to me because she can fix this part of me. It's really more knowing your mentor's strength and looking at your mentor for guidance in that aspect, and being aware of what you need from your mentor and always bringing it out. I think it's really a relationship, so it can't just be about you mentioning all your problems in your business. It's really also about knowing your mentor and finding that bridge.
And Andy, did you find that as well?
Yes, exactly. I think the matching process, it took time. I think about maybe several weeks, and I got noticed from Jetska after the matching, and I was introduced with the mentor, and I was wondering how come I got a mentor from India, where was the origin of yoga. Of course, he always said that he didn't know yoga, and even he didn't meditate. But in every session, he asked me to do the meditation. We opened with meditation, and then he just gave me advices and wisdom, which is very familiar to me. So I think, yeah, the matching is very, very elaborate. So I think this is one of the strengths of the CBFY.
But that's a really interesting point, is that both our mentees here have talked about the matching process and how you bring people together. And I would be particularly interested in what you think the value, FA, is of these kind of cross-border relationships are in that pairing process.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's really great to kind of hear that the matching has really worked really well, and it's something that we do obviously take quite a lot of time in going through and assessing. And just to kind of add on that point, obviously when mentors and mentees apply, one of the things that we do ask is for them to really be really clear about what they're hoping to gain. So really kind of setting out or kind of clarifying what their kind of business objectives are, what are their kind of personal development objectives. And that is basically kind of how we align our matching. And rather than basing it on sector or country, we find that when you base our matching or base matching based on the mentee's needs versus the expertise of the mentor, we're able to provide much more stronger connections and a much more useful relationship between the mentor and the mentee. That being said, cultural differences is something that some people tend to be a bit apprehensive about when they join our program, because obviously one of the kind of key aspects is that we do match our mentees with mentors from all over the world, and we do try not to match mentees and mentors from the same country, because one of the key things that we do want from our program is to provide that kind of cultural learning that they may not get if they are working with someone from the same country. Not only that, it does provide like a different perspective, having someone who isn't closely tied to your cultural kind of, experience, or someone who's well connected to things that are kind of happening. By having that different advice or different perspective, I think obviously adds a bit more of a challenge to, or offers a bit more, provides mentor the opportunity to add a bit more of a challenging question or perspective to the way their mentee thinks or the way their mentee approaches different things. And I think that definitely does kind of balance out how those things work. And to kind of make sure that the mentors and mentees are able to kind of move forward and get off on a really good start, we do invest a lot of time at the very beginning of the relationship or just before they actually kick off during our training to discuss kind of cultural differences and how that could potentially impact the way that potential mentors and mentees work together. The things taken into consideration is obviously like time difference, or someone's kind of perspective or way they speak, for example, might be a bit different to kind of someone's perspective. So one of the kind of key things we do really stress is definitely at the very beginning is taking the time to actually get to know your new mentoring partner, spending time to find a common understanding and a common ground. And I think that usually kind of stands around or comes around, what the kind of learning objectives, kind of what the key things they want to kind of get from the mentoring relationship. So using that as a kind of basis and foundation, I think really helps kind of set the tone and to kind of avoid any potential challenges that kind of come from working across different cultures.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating because there are some barriers which are universal. Women feeling like they don't have enough confidence, I think, is a universal thing. Women I've known across the world at some point or another will question whether they have the ability or skills. And I think our two mentors are absolute illustration of yes, you do. But sometimes it can be a cultural thing that, in my part of the world, in my community, this isn't what women do. So having a mentor that will say, hold on a minute, yes, you can, I've done it, other people have done it, I think is a really good challenge to them. Julie, did you find that was a helpful thing for you, given, you had been involved in business already, you had a lot of that business acumen, but for you it was a different kind of issue?
Mine was actually very specific and very personal. Like one obstacle for me that was overcome with a mentoring program. So in the Philippines, just to address your question, in the Philippines, I don't think we have huge barriers. At least from where I am, it's men and women are not as unequal. So it was really more growing up with my father, who's very keen on reading and learning about everything. I apparently had this insecurity about not knowing everything, and so for the first time, and then I raised it with my mentor, and she said, it's okay not to know everything. And I was actually stumped. Like, really? It's okay not to know everything? Because this is something I didn't grow up with. And I don't know if that's specific. I don't think it's the case for other people in the Philippines, maybe for somebody else all over anywhere in the world. But for me specifically, this was one thing that was addressed that helped me move forward with how I ran the business. That even if I didn't know things, it didn't mean I couldn't move forward.
Yeah, I don't think I think it's to do with individuals. I certainly had for a long time thought, if I don't know the answers to everything, how could I possibly even start doing this? And then having someone saying it's okay not to know is incredibly liberating, isn't it? Andy, I'm really interested in you were talking about having a network of entrepreneurs, of other female entrepreneurs that you've assembled or connected with. I'm really interested in how you managed to build that network, how you've connected with them.
It was maybe it is specifically my talent, because I used to be an online community manager when I was still in the media. So I knew many people out there, mothers, fathers, parents. So we became friends, and then until now we still keep in touch. Some of them they grow a business. Some of them they grew community. So now I think I harvest many of the, when I was still in the corporate world. So but thinking about what Julie said, the thing that makes me maybe fortunate in this situation, when my mentor, he keep on remembering me that everyone now suffer, and you have to seek out people outside, because everyone face uncertainty. So everyone you say hello, they probably need connectivity with you. So why don't you try? Why don't you say hello to all friends, all the connections you have? So that is maybe that happens to many women. They already have all the resources, but they have, yeah, they might be forgetful about things because all our routine, all our chores. But then someone keep on telling you, remembering you. You have many friends out there, and in this uncertainty, it might be many people seeking for your help, seeking to collaborate with you. Why don't you keep in touch with them? I think that is what I can answer to your question.
I think that's really interesting. I think there's a really common stereotype that certainly exists in the United Kingdom, which is that the women aren't very good at problem solving, particularly when it comes to business, and that we can't manage businesses, and that's something that that maybe the men we should leave to the men. So there are certain roles that we're good at, but those hard business decisions we shouldn't do. What do you think to that?
I'm answering,
Yes.
right? So that is not maybe not the case. What happened to me in my household, because I had this elaborate and very diverse educational experience at my home. I had the same weight in responsibility with my younger brother and with my husband, because he is an activist. He had, yeah, he shared me the same responsibility in a household, and possibility doing something to support financially. So I don't think the same thing happened to others, but I think because of that, sometimes maybe society told me something I don't really care. So I focus on my work. So maybe that makes me sustain for the last 11 years, doing the things that in terms of unfamiliarity. Mindfulness is not familiar, even not familiar until now. And even if people ask me about yoga, they are more familiar with yoga, but actually I'm giving more about the mindfulness aspect. but I keep on going, and I think that if I focus on the subject matter, I will grow, and one by one people are seeking me, and yeah, I think there will not be a problem if we do not focus on the labeling.
Absolutely. Effie, I'm really interested. Is there a particular point in the growth of a business or the lifetime of a business where mentoring is particularly helpful?
Not on our program. I mean, that being said, usually when it comes to like the stage of business or the kind of point in the journey for mentors and mentees, we usually accept mentors or mentees on our program who are on the verge of launching a business as like the earlier stage to kind of participate. So usually about 3 months before they launch a business is ideally like the cut-off point in which we will accept women, and then obviously women who've been running their business for a number of years. The reason for that is that we just find that even though it does sound like a very long time, 1 year working with a mentor, it does actually fly by very quickly. And so we find that, you know, to kind of get the most out of the mentoring relationship, we really ideally it's best for women who are either about to launch their business or already launching the or already running a business, to kind of use that time with their mentor to kind of get the most and the most benefit in regards to their business or their kind of personal development. Yeah, their personal development. Yeah, that's kind of where we are in regards to that. I think that's literally the kind of only kind of like point in which we would say, and ideally where you should start, or where we would ideally welcome women onto the program.
Have the experiences of Andy and Juliet, are they typical of the mentors that the mentees that come into contact with the foundation and our mentors?
Completely. So it's really great to kind of hear that. Even though that being said, each obviously mentoring relationship is unique. A lot of the kind of key themes that they kind of mentioned are things that a lot of women experience in the program: potential apprehension of working with someone who may not be from their same culture, but then being able to actually kind of build on that relationship and build on those experience of being able to kind of, you know, find a common understanding and be able to kind of take the relationship forward to find ways in which they can both support each other. So it's great to kind of hear that, you know, the mentoring relationship isn't just for the benefit of the mentee. They both kind of shared that, you know, the mentor was also able to kind of gain from their time on the program, which is obviously something that we really do stress, that, you know, mentoring is a two-way street. We do obviously expect mentors to support their mentees with their business and their personal development, but it's also really important for the mentor to take time to think about their own learning objectives and kind of how they want to kind of, what they hope to kind of gain from the experience. And we always do find that mentors are always kind of a little bit surprised at the end of the program that actually, you know what, they kind of came in with really no expectations about, you know, gaining anything themselves. They really were willing to kind of, you know, put everything forward to kind of support the mentee, but actually finding at the end of the program that, you know, they've been able to actually take something away, be it learning about a different culture, learning about a different type of business, or potentially just kind of developing a really great relationship with the woman entrepreneur that they've been supporting. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's all the mentors I've ever spoken to have always come away feeling like there's been it's been a mutual benefit, that both, you know, both sides in this relationship have grown and benefited from it. And it's really been brilliant to hear from two successful women entrepreneurs who are doing extraordinary things in different parts of the world and have been supported by the foundation and the business program. So thank you very much. Our time has flown by. We could be carrying on talking for hours, but I'm afraid we have to bring this section of the discussion to an end. I am really pleased to be able to hand over to Sian Hawkins, who's our Director of External Affairs at the Foundation, who's going to share some insights about our recent research about the gender gap in entrepreneurship and the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on women entrepreneurs. So Sian, over to you.
Thank you so much, Tanya, and fascinating to hear that discussion with Julie and Andy. A real treat to be able to have a kind of front side seat to that. So thank you everyone on FA as well. Really great to be here today to talk to you about something really close to our hearts, actually, at the Cherie Blair Foundation for Women, which is all around that kind of intersection between gender and entrepreneurship, and how this plays really a huge part in the experiences of the women entrepreneurs that we work with across the world. And spoiler alert, probably not a massive surprise to our audience here today, but that's not always a positive correlation. And we know that actually gender plays a huge part in the barriers that women are facing in their entrepreneurship journeys. So just briefly, I wanted to share with you some information about women entrepreneurs across the ASEAN region. We know that the number of women entrepreneurs across this region has increased steadily, with now more than 60 million women across the ASEAN region operating businesses. And the majority of these businesses are small and medium-sized enterprises. And these companies and the women who run them are absolutely fundamentally crucial to the economy in the region. It goes without saying that there's a clear financial imperative in supporting women entrepreneurs to be successful. And we know the great impact this can have on economies all over the world. But there's also a really important gender justice angle to this work, which Tanya already mentioned in the introduction. Globally, we are still a staggering 267 years away from equal economic participation. And empowering women entrepreneurs to be able to start and run businesses is absolutely central to this work to bring that global gender divide down. And the work that we've been doing with the APEC-Canada Growing Business Partnership, funded by Global Affairs Canada, directly contributes to this work. And since the beginning of our mentoring program in the ASEAN region, in 2012, the Cherie Blair Foundation for Women has worked with over 500 women entrepreneurs across this region by providing training, mentoring, and networking. And we're extremely proud of the impact that this work has already had. And it's just been amazing to already hear from such fantastic advocates in Andy and Julie about the impact of this work. But we know, and it would be remiss of us not to talk about the impact that this last year has had on women entrepreneurs in the region, but also globally. The COVID pandemic has meant that we've had a year like no other. And I want to share with you some insights and research and findings that we at the Cherie Blair Foundation have collected and analysed, and how this is impacting our work moving forward. So I just want to talk a bit about the gendered impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we know that even before the pandemic hit the world in the early months of 2020, economic participation and opportunity for women was already diminishing globally. And according to the World Economic Forum, this is for a number of key reasons. Women have greater representation in roles that are being automated. Not enough women are entering professions where wage growth is actually the most pronounced. So that's most obviously, but not exclusively, in the tech sector. And insufficient care infrastructure supporting women to be able to work and carry out caring responsibilities. And it's been widely reported that this pandemic has disproportionately impacted women. An ILO report on the impact of COVID found 40% of all employed women across the world work in the 4 hardest hit sectors by the pandemic. And that's compared to 36% of men. We also know that women-owned businesses are more vulnerable to economic disruption at the local, national, regional, and global level. Their businesses largely have thinner capital buffers than male-owned businesses. They're operating in lower margin, more service-based industries, and they're more vulnerable to economic shock. Furthermore, they might be less likely to access fiscal support packages, which are being designed to support enterprises through the COVID pandemic. And that's due to a historic lack of gender disaggregated data about entrepreneurship, which means that women are often left out of policy making, analysis, and decision making. Compounding all of this is the existing unpaid care burden. And we know that around the world, women are already performing 3/4 of unpaid care. And we know that throughout the pandemic that this proportion of care that women are doing within the household has increased. The Foundation's 2020 annual audit of the experiences of women entrepreneurs published in March uncovered some really significant findings in relation to women's entrepreneurs' experiences of trying to keep their businesses just going through the pandemic. Nearly 1 in 10 women reported to us that the COVID-19 pandemic was the single greatest challenge that they'd ever faced. And this is really, really significant in the context of the women that we're talking about in our work. We know that women working and building enterprises across low and middle income countries are already often running their businesses in extremely challenging circumstances, where issues like war, conflict, climate change, political instability, or poor infrastructure can already be major obstacles. In fact, the UN Women's Asia Pacific study on the impact of COVID-19 sheds more light specifically into the situation of women entrepreneurs in this region. And out of the women entrepreneurs that they surveyed, 86% said they were negatively impacted or very negatively impacted by the pandemic. And 34% of entrepreneurs reported that they soon might have to close their business operations entirely. And I'll come on to talk a bit more about the impact of this shortly. I wanted to share with you some data from our work, and this shows the impact of the COVID-19 on specific operations within women's businesses that we found. Over half of women that have reported to us challenges with accessing their customers and markets, and this is obviously a huge challenge if you're trying to run a business and you can't anymore access your market. So we've used this data and we've been trying to support women with digital marketing and e-commerce. So we've actually added new modules into our programs, our APEC Venture and our in-country learning program Road to Growth, to cover these modules and to cover this additional learning in more detail. And I know that that's something that through the mentoring program, lots of women have been able to access help with as well, and really to unlock new markets through learning more about digital marketing and e-commerce. Women also reported to us huge challenges with the production of goods and interruptions in access to services that they require for their businesses. And other aspects of businesses being impacted by the pandemic also include staffing and supply chains. We want as a foundation to look more into women's access to supply chains, in access to public procurement, to enable access to new, safe and ethical supply chain routes for women entrepreneurs. I also briefly want to touch on the impact of the disruption that the COVID-19 pandemic is causing and why initiatives such as our mentoring programs are ever more important. And this chart, this data that we collected, shows the incredibly stark impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on women like those supported through the Growing Business Partnership. A huge number of women have reported to us that their business may have to close as a result of the pandemic. And we asked women what the impact of their business closing would be, not only on their business, but on their life and their well-being in general. Extremely concerningly, 46% of women felt that they would struggle to support themselves if their business was forced to close. And 43% of women would struggle to support their families. Over a third of women also reported that they would be simply unable to afford basic necessities such as food. And we know that globally, 27% of women entrepreneurs start a business out of necessity, and there's a 20% increased likelihood that women will have to start a business out of necessity compared to men. So for many women, running their business is not just a lifestyle choice, it's about survival, particularly in countries where economies have very little or in fact no social protection available. So there is no fallback plan, there is no safety net to catch them if their business is closed down. So we're incredibly concerned about the long-term and ongoing impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the women that we're working with. And we're doing everything we can at the foundation to ensure that our programs meet the needs, the evolving needs of the women entrepreneurs that we're working with. As well as COVID having a highly disproportionate impact on women, as has been widely reported, there are a multitude of other gendered barriers that women entrepreneurs are facing every day. And some of the most prevalent barriers that we hear about at the foundation through our mentoring programs, through our research, through our in-country programs and through our apps are around accessing finance, legal rights and protections for women entrepreneurs specifically, and the negative gendered stereotypes that women entrepreneurs are often facing. Access to finance, though, is always the top challenge that women entrepreneurs report to us facing, and that manifests in a wide variety of different ways, from women being unable to apply for loans or investments as they don't have the required collateral needed, or the repayment terms or interest rates, just putting women off applying for any kind of finance or investment in the first place. And then there's also a distinct lack of financial products and services being marketed or even designed with women in mind at all. Our default perception, our default ideas about entrepreneurs are deeply rooted in a male lens and a male experience of entrepreneurship. And that really then means that women, from the very design of financial products and services, are left out of investment capabilities. And alongside these extremely practical challenges that women face in accessing finance, there are also hugely structural and systemic barriers that women have to contend with. The World Bank has found that in a staggering 115 economies across the world, women do not have equal access to the types of financial services or loans, credit cards or bank accounts that will enable them to become entrepreneurs. And in at least 155 countries across the world, there is one law that limits women from running a business in the same way as men. And on top of these challenges, we know that women are grappling with the impacts of unconscious bias, social norms, and deeply entrenched negative stereotypes and ideas about what roles and jobs and industries are for women, what roles, jobs, and industries are for men. And these are really the invisible barriers that are holding women back at all stages of their education and business development. So mentorship has significant value to the work that we're doing around the world to empower women entrepreneurs. And over and above the day-to-day mentoring work that happens on our programme, the value of mentorship is to break down some of these barriers to success. Mentors can support the continued challenge to the current status quo, that we need to see if women entrepreneurs are going to be able to participate in an ecosystem with a level playing field. And it goes without saying that, fantastic mentees like Andy and Julie also have a huge role to play in challenging the status quo. And just by hearing the stories and promoting what they've been doing, it puts a huge challenge out there into who, what is the picture of an entrepreneur, a successful entrepreneur. Our mentors can be real champions for women's entrepreneurship within their own spheres of influence. And we can't underestimate the impact that this kind of soft influencing has on the ecosystem that women entrepreneurs are working within. Mentors can also help promote positive and inspirational stories like those that we've heard today of women entrepreneurs through their social media channels, LinkedIn, and helping their mentee actually to access the kind of publicity and access the spaces and forums that they need to be in to share their stories, so that we now start seeing women entrepreneurs on a more regular basis, on a more level playing field. And mentors also have a powerful role to play in supporting the rise of the next generation of entrepreneurs. And at the Foundation, we're really committed to continuing to facilitate these important global relationships. But we can't just leave it to the mentors and mentees, that they can't do all of the work that we need to do by themselves. And there's a huge amount for everyone to do in this area, from policymakers, from funders to corporate organisations, civil society organisations, successful entrepreneurs working in this space. And really, this is about putting women front and centre of post-COVID economic policy. We have an opportunity within the Building Back Better agenda to really centre women in how we look at economic policy across the world. And that hasn't historically been done, and that's what leads to these kind of gender gaps. We also need to ensure that women entrepreneurs have equal access to the kind of fiscal support packages that governments are designing to help enterprises through this really difficult period. And we know that this lack of gender disaggregated data really stops women from having equal access to the kind of support that they need. And we also, importantly, want to work with as many partners as possible through our work with the Foundation to ensure that we are looking at all of the barriers that we've talked about today that women entrepreneurs are facing. And we are putting plans together with our partners, with women entrepreneurs, of how we go about systematically breaking down those barriers to give women entrepreneurs the best possible chance for success, the chance for success that they absolutely deserve.
Thanks, Sian. It's a pretty grim picture, isn't it? We know that women entrepreneurs face huge barriers, and which COVID-19 has only really exacerbated to a shocking extent. We know that mentoring is a key means of breaking down some of the gendered barriers to success that women entrepreneurs often face in their day-to-day lives. And I'd now like to welcome our wonderful friend, Amar Nehawar, who has worked on the Growing Business Partnership from its earliest days and is an expert in gender policy and women's economic empowerment. And Amar now works at Oxfam Canada. She, with Sean and Efe, will reflect on what can be done by governments and policymakers to put women entrepreneurs front and centre of economic policy as governments all over the world look to build back their economies following the devastating impact of the pandemic.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Tanya, and thank you for joining Efe and I, Amar. Before we dive into our discussion, it'd be really great to hear from you a bit about your background with the APEC-Canada Growing Business Partnership.
Thank you so much for having me on this panel. Yes, I've been involved with the APEC-Canada Growing Business Partnership when I worked at the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada. I've been involved with the project since its inception in 2016 as a research fellow, and had the opportunity to help manage and lead the project in its later years. Currently, I'm working as a women's rights policy specialist with Oxfam Canada.
Great. And I'd be really interested to hear from you about what you think the importance of mentorship programs and other similar kinds of professional development opportunities are for women entrepreneurs and other disadvantaged groups in entrepreneurship.
Thank you, Sean. Mentorship programs have the potential to be an extremely important opportunity for women and gender diverse entrepreneurs and other historically marginalized groups building and growing enterprises. I think often the assumption is that women, not only in Canada, but in developing and emerging markets, have the ideas and ambitions to become successful entrepreneurs, but are held back by barriers such as lack of access to skills, technologies, networks, and finance. But from my experience working on the APEC-Canada Growing Business Partnership and having the amazing opportunity to connect with women entrepreneurs and social businesses throughout the region, it's never a matter of skills and wills, rather the systemic imbalances in our economy that enable men to succeed. This ranges from explicit biases in our financial systems and in the corporate world to the unpaid care responsibilities and the invisible free labor that women around the world do and provide to keep families and communities nurtured, healthy, and clean. A recent statistic from Canada exemplifies some of these biases. Women-owned businesses are twice as likely as their male-owned counterparts to be considered social enterprises in Canada and are less likely to receive venture capital funding. So without meaningful access to the same kind of funding support, women-owned social enterprises may have a harder time recovering from the economic impacts of this pandemic. So the prevalence of gender-blind policies ranging from macroeconomic approaches to financing and growth to smaller entrepreneurship and livelihood programs further demonstrate the importance and need of gender-specific mentorship programs. They offer personalized support, healthy and productive networks, and insights into financial access and capital, and the necessary know-how that women and gender diverse entrepreneurs need to succeed.
Thank you. And so much of that resonates with what we hear at the foundation. And I know that we hear from women all the time, particularly women who've been through our mentoring and through our in-country programs, that they gain so much in terms of skills and experience by participating, and they feel really motivated to use those new skills and use that learning, but then they come out of our programs and the world around them hasn't changed. So those same systemic and structural barriers that they're facing are still there and still present just the most enormous, sometimes insurmountable obstacles for their business progression. But Efe, you are our mentoring guru at the foundation, and it would just be fantastic to hear from you. Obviously, you have a wealth of experience at a really global level around women's entrepreneurship. And from your perspective, what are the key important factors of mentoring programs for and other kind of professional development opportunities for women entrepreneurs that you're working with?
Thanks, Sean. Love the intro, love the guru bit. I think definitely for us, what we see as the joy for mentoring particularly for women entrepreneurs, is that it really does develop over a period of time. And so for our program, our program is a 1 year long program. And during that time, mentees, well, obviously women entrepreneurs, have the opportunity to obviously work with their mentor, who are there and have a genuine interest and a genuine care for the kind of business and personal goals of the women entrepreneurs that they're working with. During the time that they're working together, mentees are encouraged and supported and motivated by their mentors to set out like smart goals that they can work on. And they kind of both feed into it, which I think develops even more strong connection as they're both really invested in seeing it through. We find that mentees usually do share that, being an entrepreneur or being a CEO can be quite isolating when they are obviously there on top by themselves trying to run these businesses. So having that additional support from someone who's there to just, be a sounding board, offer encouragement, offer a challenge, it can be really transformative to a mentee's kind of development and her business development as well. We also find that obviously mentoring does have tangible benefits to women entrepreneurs and their businesses that they run. Taking our program, for example, we find that women are able to generate or create jobs, which is obviously amazing, and that they are more than likely to recruit and hire other women, which obviously is a huge benefit to their communities. So in 2020, 1,946 new jobs were created by 779 graduates from our program, which is amazing and a really great statistic for us to see. We also find that women are able to increase their profits. So looking at 2020, we found that mentees shared that 70% of mentees shared that they were able to actually increase their profits during the pandemic, which obviously was quite a challenging time. And these things obviously do have an impact on their communities and the economies that these women are obviously a part of. Another kind of key great thing about mentoring is that it does build soft skills for a lot of women over time. We find that obviously women may find it harder to develop business skills and are more inclined to know more kind of traditional business skills, but not soft skills. For example, Julie, who explained that her Canadian mentor kind of gave her the confidence, which is something typical of women in our mentoring program. In 2020, we also found that 95% of our women who participate in the program also shared that, their participation in the program increased their confidence, improved their communication skills, and they found themselves being more innovative when it came to their business and being able to kind of challenge the kind of ways of their original thinking and the way that they were acting.
Great, thanks, Efe. So interesting. And that ripple impact is something that we're ever more interested in, isn't it, at the foundation and in the women's economic empowerment space more generally, because we really recognize and understand that when you empower women entrepreneurs, you are often empowering their family, their households, their community, and the impact that has on economies at that kind of macro level is really, really significant. And we know that the way that men and women entrepreneurs look at their business opportunities is different. We know that often women are seeing their entrepreneurial businesses, the businesses that are running as a means to an end rather than an end in itself. So, the profit making, the money making isn't the final kind of end that they're looking for, but actually it's the ability that profit, that money, that income stream enables them to invest back into their family, invest into their community. So that ripple impact is so fundamental to our work across, lots of different NGOs and multilateral organizations and funders to really make sure that work to empower women entrepreneurs is pulling into that bigger picture of women's economic empowerment, which we know is just so crucial to development more generally. And on top of that, you know, this is really a matter of gender justice, isn't it? It's a matter of equal rights for women entrepreneurs who should absolutely be able to set up and run businesses in the same way that men can. But at the moment, we know there are structural, systemic, legal, policy and regulatory barriers which are holding them back from being able to do that. And that is you know, grossly discriminatory towards the women that we're working with. And we know that still the latest figures that came out in March from the World Economic Forum showed that we're still 267 years away from equal economic participation for women if we carry on at the current trajectory. And that is just a shocking figure that should be an absolute wake-up call for all of us. And further to that, I think it's been interesting that we the difference as well in between the amount of women and men who are setting up and running businesses out of necessity. And we know that women are 20% more likely than their male counterparts to set up and run a business out of necessity, because that is their only way to bring an income stream into their household or into their family, and they are unable to access the formal labour market in other ways. And that's a really crucial part, you know, for lots of the women entrepreneurs that we're working with across low and middle income countries, to make sure that we're able to provide this really effective and high quality support to women who are running their businesses because there aren't any other formal labour market opportunities for them. So I think from our point of view, more than ever, particularly in the wake of the COVID pandemic, which we talked about earlier in the session, the mentors have such a powerful role to play in supporting the rise of the next generation of entrepreneurs. And at the foundation, we are, you know, always committed to continuing to facilitate these important relationships across the world, which is, you know, exactly what FA and her team are doing every day. So it'd be really great to hear from you both a bit more about what more can be done to shore up these mentoring programs and investment in the entrepreneurial ecosystems that women are operating in. So FA, it'd be great to hear from you first about the kinds of investments that need to be made so that entrepreneurial ecosystems can really grow and thrive.
I think it's really important to kind of, you know, keep in mind that, you know, the need for mentors for mentees where, you know, maybe in their day-to-day lives, they may not have the access or the opportunity or the network or the access to networks of business people who can obviously be available to kind of offer that support to them. So by creating these type of networks, such as our program is enabling these women to do, women entrepreneurs not only are able to feel more encouraged to continue to grow their business, but they obviously have the opportunity to expand their networks to include more kind of business professionals. I think it's also really important not to underestimate the need for soft skills, and to ensure that this is something that is kind of prioritized by funders as well as policymakers, because these are skills that men are able to pick up quite easily through the connections that they're exposed to. So just to kind of round up my point about mentoring, it's a really great, a great way to develop these skills. And we find that in our program, not only is there increase in confidence, they're able to kind of improve their kind of, you know, communication skills. But yeah, just offering those opportunities to allow them to kind of grow in that way, and having someone like a mentor to offer that support and offer that kind of, you know, motivation and guidance, I think is really important and really offers these women entrepreneurs an opportunity that they may not get elsewhere.
Yeah, that's great. And so interesting that, you know, mentoring not only enables women to tap into the ecosystems that they're operating in those more informal routes that they might not necessarily have, but also it will shape the landscape of that ecosystem, because the more mentees and mentors that we're working with, the more people that are aware of some of these issues that women are facing, and more able to be agents of change, and more able to advocate for some of these bigger challenges that women are facing. So the knock-on impact of mentoring around ecosystems is really, really important for us to be looking at. So Amar, I think it'd be really interesting to hear from you on the same question, really about the kinds of investments that need to be made so that entrepreneurial ecosystems can grow and thrive at that more policy and systemic levels. So what are some of the examples from Canada and other economies in the partnership where we're really looking at how those ecosystems can work for women entrepreneurs?
Thanks, Sean. And, building off of the points that you and FA were raising, these investments in entrepreneurial ecosystems really need to be not gender blind, rather gender responsive and ideally gender transformative, so that more women, gender diverse entrepreneurs and historically marginalized groups can be set up to succeed in businesses and not exit a mentorship program, as you explained before, seeing the world, really being the same and exhibiting these biases. So, and I think, as you mentioned as well, it's almost extremely more important and pertinent than ever in a COVID context where globally women have experienced disproportionate job losses due to the pandemic and often enter entrepreneurship in a necessity-based sort of model. So some recent examples that I can sort of bring in detail from a Canadian context might include some of the stuff that came out of the most recent federal budget. $146.9 million was put into the Canadian Women's Entrepreneurship Strategy, which was built a few years ago, which is a research and action and policy hub working with women entrepreneurs across the country to overcome a lot of the barriers that were mentioned in this panel, providing solutions like mentorship to sort of alleviate some of those, and also just speaking to, again, the systemic nature and meeting women entrepreneurs where they're at. Last year, and also sort of a bit more commitment in the federal budget as well, up to $55 million was set up to fund a Black entrepreneurship program in Canada to help Black business owners and entrepreneurs access funding and capital, providing mentorship, financial planning services, and business training. $33.3 million went into a Black entrepreneurship loan fund, with $6.5 million going into a Black entrepreneurship knowledge hub. So again, another example of how we're combining, like, knowledge hubs, like loan access to capital, and just like broader strategies that include mentorship. And mentorship is a huge component of it to help communities, women, historically marginalized communities and entrepreneurs sort of enter these ecosystems with the support and resources that are needed to be done. Similar initiatives can be seen across the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation and in countries specifically themselves. In Viet Nam, for example, there's been a huge push to sort of support women entrepreneurs and sort of bring women into, the formal economies through a range of projects launched across, the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Innovation of Growth. And I'll kind of wrap up by saying, these are very important first steps and investments, but really like a drop in the water in terms of federal spending and, the global wealth accumulated by billionaires during this pandemic. So I think a lot more money and funds should be diverted to these federal programs, these national programs, and foundations like yourself to provide these essential services and supports.
Yeah, I think we're probably all agreed on that. I mean, it's good to see, in the Canada context, a government putting the money where their mouth is. But obviously, as you've alluded to, this is pennies. This is a drop in the ocean in terms of what could be needed. And I know we know research that the foundation did with the Boston Consulting Group that we published back in 2019 showed that there's around up to $5 trillion missing from the global economy due to the gender entrepreneurship gap. And in the light and in the wake of the COVID pandemic that we're still grappling with across the globe, there could never be a more important time to invest in women entrepreneurs. So from your experience across the APEC region, are you seeing more? Do you sense that there is more of a will, more of a drive to invest in women entrepreneurs? Do you feel that there's a tangible change that you're seeing?
Well, groups like the APEC Policy Partnership on Women in the Economy have been working on this issue for years, and offers a great example of how, regional multilateral governance frameworks and private sector engagement together can address issues that women face in the economy and in the APEC region. My only issue with some of these global frameworks and commitments that have been developed over time is that they lack urgency, and the evolution of these ideas really needs to keep up with the pace with how our world is changing. A lot has been the same for decades. And again, especially in a time where COVID-19 has shown how poorly our global economy works for women. So how can we, the question I kind of have in this is how can we sort of promote entrepreneurship while simultaneously building gender just economies? And I'd like to kind of bring this panel's attention to what's been happening at the UN Women's Beijing 25 Plus process. It's essentially the 25th anniversary of the 4th Conference on Women in the adoption of the Beijing Declaration on the Platform for Action in 1995, which was the UN's commitment to organize diverse stakeholders to assess and invest in progress on gender equality throughout the world. So 25 years after this initial conference, what's happening right now is that the UN is coming together and building commitments in the form of blueprints across 6 action coalitions addressing a range of women's rights issues. These action coalitions are comprised of governments, NGOs and foundations, private sector engagements and actors, and really are focused on a wide-ranging set of issues. One action coalition is focused on economic justice and rights. One of them is also focused on technology and innovation for gender equality. So ideally, these blueprints will establish a roadmap and commitments for UN member countries, kind of think of like the SDGs, but for gender equalities, so that we have a target to work towards over the next 5 years. And the final blueprints are going to be launched in about a month. But some of the commitments included so far for governments to hit that address issues to entrepreneurship include, in the Technology and Innovation Action Coalition, we're looking at by 2026, reducing the gender digital divide by half across generations in all these countries and accelerating meaningful access to digital technologies and universal digital literacy, which we know is a barrier to entrepreneurship and participating in a lot of these programs as well. The Economic and Justice and Rights Action Coalition hopes by 2026 all countries will implement gender responsive macroeconomic plans, budget reforms, and stimulus packages. So more of these investments that we want to see are going to the groups that need it the most. So hopefully these blueprints will serve as a set of new commitments for all governments in the world to facilitate meaningful policy changes that will support women entrepreneurs globally.
Thank you so much, Emma, for that really interesting overview. And I think it's really key for us to look at those blueprints in more details, for governments to take action where they can, for policymakers to really look at where they can add value to these global blueprints and take them forward at the local level. And we know that there are really strong links as well between entrepreneurship and the Sustainable Development Goals, which were adopted by all of the UN states back in 2015. And actually, we know that women's economic empowerment is critical to the achievement of multiple SDGs, including SDG 1 on ending poverty, SDG 5 on gender equality, SDG 8 on inclusive economic growth, and SDG 10 on reducing inequalities. And women entrepreneurs, that huge untapped potential of this group of women could be really the fuel that we need to progress towards meeting these SDGs. And I think what we're seeing and what a lot of research is showing, that we were already not really on track kind of globally to achieving the SDGs, and the COVID pandemic has obviously had a massive impact on the ability of nations across the world, particularly developing and emerging economies, to be able to access or to be able to meet the commitments and requirements within the SDGs. So there is no better time really to unlock the potential of women entrepreneurs to support growth towards the SDGs, and we absolutely know that we can. And I think you've talked about the Beijing platform declaration and platform for action, and how important this is, and the follow-up work that's being done to this. And that really frames what the Beijing platform for action did. Was for the first time it really framed women's human rights as human rights, and that's really important for us to keep thinking about in the context of today, that entrepreneurship first and foremost is a matter of human rights, and it's embedded actually in various human rights instruments across the board, like CEDAW, the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, which in Article 13 highlights equal access to bank loans, credit, and equal rights in economic and social life. So I think for a long time, actually, access and equal access to entrepreneurship has been enshrined in international human rights obligations, in statutes, in conventions, but we are still not seeing this being translated into policy, into legislation, into practice at the level that it should be. And this is a massive, massive problem. And the World Bank found in its most recent analysis that in 115 countries in the world, there are laws which are actually discriminating against women, stopping women from, in legislation, from being able to set up or start their own businesses. And in over 155 economies in the world, women and men are unable to set up a business in the same way, and women are being discriminated against. So clearly, there is still much work to be done. But Emma, it would be really great to hear from you if there are some specific policy or legislative or programmatic interventions that are happening in the APEC area that have had a positive impact for women entrepreneurs and are unpicking some of these more systemic barriers.
Yeah, Sean, you laid it out, perfectly. Addressing women's entrepreneurship requires like almost a whole of government approach because it intersects with so many critical issues. We're not looking at women entrepreneurs in a vacuum. We're looking at a range of sort of societal, legislative, legal, discriminatory barriers that often hinder businesses from growing the way that we want to see. So it is heartening that these multilateral frameworks are, approaching it from multiple perspectives. We're looking at the law, we're looking at biases in businesses, we're looking at, labor markets, we're looking at what's needed in the countries. Climate justice is a bit part of this as well, especially when we're looking at the Asia Pacific region. How can the transition to a green economy be facilitated by women-owned businesses, and how can we make women-owned small businesses in regions that are vulnerable to sort of climate change adapt and mitigate and be a part of that response? When I'm thinking about specific policies and program, the first thing that comes to mind are these collaborative programs and actions done between governments and multilaterals. In Indonesia, for example, We Empower Asia is a huge program that's run by UN Women and the European Union and multiple governments of Indonesia to support the sort of promotion of women-owned MSMEs through a range of actions, like as we see in the APEC-Canada Growing Business Partnership. We need toolkits, we need trainings, we need mentorship, we need broader scale advocacy programs, and we need to sort of create flows to financial access. So We Empower has run a bunch of workshops with the Indonesian Ministry of Labor, also the investment promotion agencies, to really sort of make sure that women entrepreneurs are captured. I think one thing that's a bit frightening about the COVID pandemic is not only the disproportionate impact it's had on women and women entrepreneurs, but how in the fiscal response to COVID-19, a lot of the governments are not adopting or investing in these gender responsive policies. We know we're told that we have to fix the economy, but we're not. Everyone is trying to build back better, but it's going to take a while to build back to gender just economy. So I speak about these programs, having worked on them, before the pandemic. But my fear is that governments are hesitant to sort of continue to investing in gender responsive recovery packages. One example of a very great intergovernmental civil society private sector coordination in an APEC economy is the work that's done with the APEC-Canada Business Partnership project partner CUNAN. CUNAN is a sort of agency in Peru developed by the Ministry of Innovation to sort of support social enterprises throughout the country. Women run, I think I said the statistic a bit earlier, that women tend to run businesses that are not just about making a profit. Actually, you mentioned this, not just about making a profit, but how can we make a profit to benefit our families, our communities, our neighborhoods. And a lot of these businesses are socially oriented and socially inclined, they're impact driven, but tend to not fare as well in a competitive startup landscape where the objective is always sort of growth. So in Peru, CUNAN, as a sort of governmental agency, like works specifically to address the needs of social enterprises, a lot of which are run by women. And I think it's an example of how, governments can innovate and governments can create, departments and policies and ideas that really speak to the immediate need of women entrepreneurs. So to kind of conclude, like these multi-stakeholder global initiatives are really, really important and needed, but what is also needed is for local, federal governments to keep investing in, the critical barriers that stop women from achieving their full rights.
Yep, so interesting. Thank you, Emma. Really great to get your insights. And absolutely, this is a global issue, but also needs to be looked at the regional, at the national and at the local levels, because that's the reality of women's experiences as well. That it's great to have global frameworks, but it needs to work for them in the real world too, and in the context in which they're living. And I think your comments about the green economy and climate change as well is really really crucial and going to become ever more crucial. And I think that's the thing about women's entrepreneurship that we recognize more and more, is actually it intersects the challenges that women face around entrepreneurship, intersect with so many different other global social, economic, political issues and environmental issues like climate change, gender-based violence, children, childcare, unpaid care, education, poverty. Yeah, really great to hear from you, Emma, on those issues. And I hope everyone's enjoyed listening to our discussion today as much as we've all really enjoyed having it. And now I'm really happy to hand over back to Tanya, who will conclude our session for today.
Thanks so much, Amar, Shan and Efe. It's so important to hear about how governments can support international women's economic empowerment through policy and regulatory framework, and what the future of women's entrepreneurship might look like. I'm afraid we've now come to the end of our session, Gender Entrepreneurships, Reflections from Mentorship Experiences. Thank you so much for joining us as we focused on the role of gender in determining entrepreneurship experiences and the important role of mentorship in addressing these challenges. We heard directly from our mentors, Julie and Andy, about their experience of mentorship and explored the role of the Foundation's mentoring program in supporting women entrepreneurs in Asia Pacific. Heard about the impact of COVID-19 on women entrepreneurs and discussed what can be done to further women's economic empowerment by government and policymakers around the world. We really hope you enjoyed this session, and if you've got any more questions, the Foundation will be available to answer them through the network events that follows this.